It's one of the best-selling personal finance books ever written. A true global phenomenon that promised to unlock the secrets of the rich. But the big question remains, is Rich Dad Poor Dad a revolutionary path to financial freedom? Or is it just a really convincing and maybe even dangerous ruse? First, let's just try to get our heads around the scale here. We are talking about 26 million copies sold. That is a staggering amount of influence, shaping how an entire generation of people think about money and investing all over the world. So what was it? What was the big secret? What was the core idea that got millions of people so excited? Well, it turns out it all comes down to a really simple but kind of profound shift in how you look at things. Okay, so it all kicks off with a brand new way of thinking. The author, Robert Kiyosaki, he frames it all as this fundamental difference between how his so-called rich dad and his poor dad viewed the world of money. And this right here cuts through all the noise. I mean, forget all the complicated accounting jargon you've ever heard. Rich Dad's definition is just brutally simple. An asset pays you. Think of a rental property that brings in cash every month or a stock that pays you a dividend. It's something that works for you. And of course, the flip side is just as straightforward. A liability costs you. It's constantly pulling money out of your pocket. This simple push and pull is really the beating heart of the entire Rich Dad philosophy. And this, right here, is probably the most controversial example in the entire book: your house. Now, according to Kiyosaki, the home you actually live in, that's not an asset. Why? Because the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs, they all take money from you. But, and here's the key, if you owned that same exact house, but rented it out, and it made more money than it cost you each month, well, then it becomes an asset. You see? It's not about what you own. It's all about which way the cash is flowing. So this is the whole game right here. The philosophy is stop obsessing over your paycheck and start obsessing over your asset column. The goal is to build up this collection of assets that spit out enough passive income to cover all your expenses. And when you do that, you're free. You don't have to work for a salary anymore. Now, this mindset then builds into Kiyosaki's next big idea, which he calls the cash flow quadrant. This whole framework isn't just about how much money you make, it's about how you make it. So Kiyosaki basically divides the entire working world into 4 types of people. Over on the left side, you've got employees. They value security above all else. And then you have the self-employed, who often value perfectionism and, they want to do everything themselves. But on the right side, that's where you find the business owners who create systems where other people work for them, and the investors who get their money to work for them. And the path to true wealth, the book says, is to make that jump. To get from the left side, where you're trading your time for money, over to the right side, where you own systems and assets that make money for you. It's a really compelling idea, right? But this is also where the book's advice starts to attract some serious heat. And well, here's where our story takes a very sharp turn. This absolutely scathing quote comes from John T. Reed, who's an author and a real estate investor himself, and he published this incredibly detailed takedown of Kiyosaki's work. And we're not just talking about a casual disagreement here. Critics have pointed out some really serious, fundamental problems with the book, with its advice, and, with its author. I mean, look at these allegations. They are severe. Critics like Reed, they don't just disagree with the philosophy. They're claiming it's packed with factual errors and promotes some actively dangerous ideas. For instance, Kiyosaki actually suggests using your rich friends for inside stock tips. He literally says that is what friends are for. Let me be crystal clear. That is the textbook definition of insider trading. It's a felony. The criticisms go way beyond just bad advice, with some even saying the book advocates for tax fraud. The controversy also zooms in on Robert Kiyosaki himself, with a lot of people questioning the entire foundation of his personal story. Check out this timeline, because it reveals a really fascinating and kind of shifty narrative. Back in a 1992 book, Kiyosaki called his actual father, the guy he would later brand as Poor Dad, his best teacher ever. But by 1997, that title suddenly belonged to the mysterious Rich Dad. Fast forward to 2006, and he names a completely different mentor, the famous inventor Buckminster Fuller. It seems like the story changes depending on which book he's trying to sell. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all. Was there ever even a rich dad? Kiyosaki has always refused to identify him. And even though there are clues in the book, reporters in Hawaii have never been able to find anyone who actually fits the description. A lot of critics now believe he's a complete fabrication, made up for the story. And then, There's this. In 2012, one of Kiyosaki's main companies, Rich Global LLC, filed for bankruptcy. Now, for a guy selling financial advice to the world, this raised even more serious questions about whether his methods actually work in the real world. So, you've got a bankruptcy, you have serious questions about whether his whole origin story is even true. It kind of begs the question, with all this controversy, what do we do with the book today? Is there any value left in it, or should we just toss it out entirely? Let's try to reevaluate it for the modern world. You know, a lot of modern analysts seem to agree on this one key point. You should probably read Rich Dad Poor Dad as a book about changing your mindset and not as a practical step-by-step guide for investing your money. So, the good part? It's timeless. That core idea of focusing on assets that pay you is still a super powerful mental shift for anybody just starting their financial journey. But the bad part? Well, it's dangerously dated. The book's obsession with physical real estate and its advice to pretty much ignore diversification, that's just terrible advice in today's economy, where whole industries can be disrupted overnight. Think about it. The book's very old-school approach completely misses tools that are absolutely essential for a modern investor. You won't find a single mention of simple, powerful strategies like diversifying your investments through low-cost index funds. It ignores the rise of digital assets like real estate investment trusts, and it offers zero guidance on how to navigate the complex world of today's interest rates and rapid technological change. So here's the final takeaway. Maybe the best way to approach Rich Dad Poor Dad is to let it be the spark. Let it inspire you to think differently about money. Absorb that philosophy of making your money work for you. But when it's time to actually invest, put the book down and turn to modern, data-driven strategies to actually build your plan. And that brings us right back to the very first lesson. It's a question worth asking yourself right now, no matter what you think of the book or the guy who wrote it. So I'll just leave you with this. What's in your asset column?